On the morning of May 1st, 2025, a phone rings inside the Payette Police Department. A woman is on the line. She is not screaming. She is not incoherent. She is calm enough to give her address. She tells the dispatcher that something is wrong with her children. The address belongs to a home on North 9th Street in Payette, Idaho, a small town of roughly 8,000 people, 60 miles northwest of Boise, sitting almost on the Oregon border. It is the kind of town where a house fire makes the front page. It is not the kind of town that expects to become the center of a national conversation about vaccines, motherhood, and murder. Officers arrive within minutes. What they find inside that home will end one investigation and begin another, an investigation that will not close for 14 months. Two 18-month-old children, twins, a boy and a girl, found together face down in a bed they shared. Both are dead. This is the case of Andrea Shaw. To understand what happened inside that house, you first have to understand the 6 days that came before it. According to court records later filed by both prosecutors and the defense, the twins, a boy named Dallas and a girl named Tyson, had received a routine round of childhood vaccinations shortly before their deaths. The specific shots administered were for hepatitis A, seasonal influenza, and DTaP, a combination vaccine that protects against diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. These are among the most common immunizations given to toddlers in the United States, recommended by the CDC and administered to millions of children every year. On April 25, 2025, 6 days before the twins were found dead, Andrea Shaw called a nurse. She was concerned. According to the motion later filed by her own defense attorney, she was told to give the children acetaminophen for fever and electrolytes to keep them hydrated. This is, by any clinical standard, a routine piece of advice for a parent describing mild post-vaccination symptoms. Nothing about that phone call, on its own, suggests anything sinister was unfolding. 6 days later, on May 1st, everything changed. Court documents state that Shaw found one of the twins cold to the touch. She called 911. She began CPR. When officers arrived, they searched the home and found the second twin, also dead. Both children were discovered face down in the bed they shared. Investigators who processed the scene would later describe the children's bodies as frozen, a term medical experts say can indicate that rigor mortis, the stiffening of the body after death, had already begun to set in by the time police arrived. Autopsies were performed the following day at the Ada County Medical Examiner's office. And then, nothing, or at least nothing visible to the public. The Payette Police Department released a short statement. 2 children were dead, the circumstances were suspicious, the investigation was ongoing, no suspect was named. For the community of Payette, this was the entirety of what they knew, that twin toddlers had died together in their beds, and that police believed foul play was involved. For nearly 14 months, that is where the public record stood still. 3 days after the twins were found dead, Andrea Shaw appeared on an internet program. The show was produced by Children's Health Defense, an advocacy organization that has spent years campaigning against childhood vaccination. The organization was founded by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has since become the United States Secretary of Health and Human Services. Kennedy formally stepped down from his role with the organization in December of 2024, when he joined the Trump administration, several months before Shaw's appearance on the program. On that broadcast, with her children barely in the ground, Andrea Shaw told her story. She said the twins had received their vaccines from 2 nurses, administered at the same time. She said that shortly afterward they became sick. And then she said, they died. It is important to be precise about the medical reality here because it matters to everything that follows. The vaccines in question, hepatitis A, influenza, and DTaP, have been administered to children for decades. They are supported by an overwhelming body of peer-reviewed research. Major medical organizations, including the American Academy of Pediatrics, classify them as safe and effective. There is no established scientific link between these vaccines and sudden death in toddlers. None of that stopped the story from spreading. Shaw's account, delivered raw and only days removed from unimaginable loss, became a rallying point within anti-vaccine communities online. It fit a narrative those communities had been building for years, a narrative about hidden dangers, about medical authorities covering up harm, about grieving parents nobody would listen to. Andrea Shaw became, in certain corners of the internet, a face of that narrative. Behind the scenes in Payette, Idaho, a police investigation was still running, quietly, methodically, for more than a year. On June 29, 2026, nearly 14 months after the twins were found dead, a Payette County grand jury returned an indictment. Andrea Shaw was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The indictment did not allege a vaccine reaction. It did not allege a medical accident. It alleged that Shaw had killed both of her children by the act of suffocating them, and further, that she had done so willfully, unlawfully, deliberately, with premeditation, and with malice aforethought. Those are not casual words in a courtroom. Premeditation and malice aforethought are the specific legal elements that separate first-degree murder from every lesser charge on the books. The indictment stated that the act was either planned in advance or occurred in the course of an aggravated battery. Under Idaho law, a conviction on these charges carries a maximum penalty of life in prison or death. The following day, June 30th, Boise police located Andrea Shaw and took her into custody without incident. She was booked into the Ada County Jail before being transferred to Payette County to face the charges against her. There was one more detail buried in the court filings, a detail that would come to dominate much of the coverage that followed. 5 days before her arrest, on June 25, 2026, Andrea Shaw had given birth to another child, a daughter, born 3 weeks premature, delivered by emergency cesarean section. According to court documents, the newborn spent 1 night in the neonatal intensive care unit before being released. Andrea Shaw was arrested less than a week later. On July 2, 2026, Andrea Shaw appeared by video from the Payette County Jail for her formal arraignment. A judge confirmed that she understood her rights. The judge explained on the record exactly what she was facing: 2 counts of first-degree murder, each carrying a maximum penalty of life imprisonment or execution, along with a $50,000 fine. Bond was set at $2 million. Shaw did not enter a plea that day. She would later plead not guilty. Her attorney, Joseph Filicetti, spoke to reporters outside the courtroom, and what he said set the tone for the defense that would follow. Filicetti argued that the deaths of the twins were the result of a medical issue, not a crime. He told reporters that his client believed, and continued to believe, that vaccines had killed her children. He went further, stating that he had personally consulted doctors who supported that opinion. But Filicetti's sharpest criticism was not aimed at the medical evidence. It was aimed at the process itself. Rather than proceeding through a preliminary hearing, a public proceeding in which both prosecution and defense can present evidence and question witnesses before a judge, prosecutors had taken the case directly to a grand jury. Grand jury proceedings are conducted in secret. There is no defense attorney in the room. There is no cross-examination. Filicetti did not hold back his objection to that choice. "You can indict a cucumber," he told reporters, "because there's no defense attorney. There's no one asking critical questions." He added that he had not been notified before the indictment was returned, which he acknowledged is standard practice for grand jury proceedings, but which he clearly viewed as a process that had denied his client a fair opportunity to be heard before formal charges were filed. The defense's position was now on the record. This was a mother who lost 2 children to a tragic medical event, who was now being prosecuted on the word of a secret proceeding, without her side of the story ever being tested in open court. Prosecutors saw it very differently. At a subsequent hearing, a state prosecutor addressed the vaccine narrative directly in open court without hesitation. This case, the prosecutor said, was not a vaccine case. The state's theory, according to court proceedings, rested on physical evidence. Evidence prosecutors say demonstrates that Andrea Shaw suffocated her children. Investigators had noted back in May of 2025 that the twins were found frozen in position, face down, in the bed they shared, details consistent, according to medical experts, with the earliest stages of rigor mortis having already begun before the bodies were discovered. The defense pushed back hard on both the medical framing and the timeline. Filicetti maintained that the vaccines hepatitis A, influenza, and DTaP were the true cause of death, and that the physical findings police pointed to did not, on their own, prove suffocation, let alone premeditated murder. Outside the courtroom, Shaw had powerful allies. After the indictment was announced, Children's Health Defense posted a video statement from its chief executive, Mary Holland, publicly declaring support for Andrea Shaw. Holland stated there was, in her words, zero evidence that Shaw had killed her children. Meanwhile, Shaw remained a named plaintiff in a separate ongoing civil lawsuit, a case brought by Children's Health Defense and other plaintiffs against the American Academy of Pediatrics, alleging harm connected to childhood vaccination recommendations. That lawsuit exists entirely outside the criminal case, but the overlap between the two is impossible to ignore. The same organization funding and amplifying the vaccine injury narrative in the civil courts was now publicly defending Shaw against murder charges in a criminal one. The Payette Police Department, for its part, declined to engage with any of it. In a formal statement, the department said it would offer no further comment on the facts or evidence of the case while it remained pending before the court, and that all future information would come through the judicial process itself. On July 14, 2026, Andrea Shaw returned to the Payette County Courthouse, not for a trial date, but for a bond hearing that would become one of the most emotionally charged moments in the case so far. Her defense team asked the court to reduce her bond from $2 million down to $100,000. The motion filed on her behalf laid out a sympathetic picture. Shaw had no prior criminal history. She had deep, long-standing ties to the Payette community. She had consistently maintained her innocence since the moment she was charged, and she had just given birth, by emergency cesarean section, 3 weeks premature, days before her arrest. The prosecution asked for the opposite, not a reduction, a revocation, a complete end to any possibility of bond. The prosecutor's argument, delivered in open court, cut directly to the heart of the case. The 2 children who died in Andrea Shaw's care were also her own. If the state's theory was correct, the very fact that she was now caring for another infant was itself the danger. "We do not think she should be allowed to be anywhere near any children," the prosecutor told the court, let alone her own children, to take care of her, because it was the other 2 children who were in her care that died at the exact same time, on the same night. The judge sided with the prosecution. Bond was revoked entirely. The judge stated for the record that she did not consider Andrea Shaw a danger to the general public, but that having learned more about the underlying facts of the case, and knowing that Shaw had since given birth again, she believed Shaw posed a risk to both her newborn daughter and to herself. Andrea Shaw would remain behind bars, separated indefinitely from the child she had delivered just weeks before her arrest. As of the most recent court proceedings, Andrea Shaw has pleaded not guilty to both counts of first-degree murder. She remains in custody at the Payette County Jail without bond. No trial date has been set. Prosecutors have not yet announced whether they will pursue the death penalty, a decision they are legally entitled to make given the language of the indictment, but one that has not yet been formally confirmed on the record. Her attorney, Joseph Filicetti, has continued to speak publicly in her defense, telling reporters that his client absolutely denies doing anything even imaginably bad, and describing the state's case against her as weak. The Payette Police Department has closed ranks entirely, offering no further public statements on evidence or theory of the case, deferring everything to the judicial process still ahead. And Andrea Shaw's story continues to circulate far beyond the borders of Payette County, cited in anti-vaccine circles as an example of a mother punished for speaking an inconvenient truth, and cited by prosecutors as a case built not on ideology, but on the physical condition in which 2 18-month-old children were found, together, in a bed, on the morning of May 1, 2025. 2 theories exist for what happened inside that house on North 9th Street. Only one of them can be true. In one version of events, a young mother did everything a parent is supposed to do. She called a nurse when her children seemed unwell, she followed the advice she was given, and 6 days later, she lost both of her 18-month-old children to a medical tragedy no one could have prevented. In that version, she has spent the 14 months since not as a suspect, but as a mother grieving in public, punished further by a justice system that mistook her grief and her advocacy for guilt. In the other version, the physical evidence collected at that scene tells a very different story. One the state believes points not to illness, but to 2 acts, committed deliberately, against 2 children who could not have defended themselves, followed by 14 months in which the woman responsible continued to tell the world a different account entirely. A grand jury has already decided there is enough evidence to bring this case to trial. A jury of 12 has not yet decided anything at all. Andrea Shaw remains in custody. Her newborn daughter remains in someone else's care, and in Payette, Idaho, a town that never expected to be at the center of a story like this one. The wait for a trial date and for answers continues. This case is not over. When it is, we will be here to cover what the courtroom decides. Subscribe to Behind the Case File for more true crime investigations covered with accuracy and respect.